think where we are now, Chris, everyone is wondering what's going to happen next, what's going to happen to those people. They've been pushed basically onto a sand dune with an invisible yellow line, and if anyone approaches the yellow line, they're shot. What is going to happen to those people, and what's going to happen to the West Bank? Because I know you've been watching that closely.
Well, Israel's intent since the genocide began has been quite open and quite clear. When Anthony Blinken made his first trip to Israel after October 7th, he then went on to meet Sisi in Egypt, Abdullah in Jordan, and he had quotas of Palestinians that he wanted these countries to accept. This request was met with complete rejection. But from the beginning, the goal has been the complete eradication of Palestinians from Gaza. Israel, according to the Israeli press, has been in negotiations with countries like the Sudan, Somaliland, and Somalia about the relocation of Palestinian refugees. And what they are doing is to create conditions that are just so onerous, which is what, of course, mass starvation and famine does, that the moment they are able to open the door, Palestinians will leave. That is what has... Remember, Israel, it physically occupies 53% still of Gaza, but it still, in essence, occupies all of Gaza. Its drones are in the sky, it controls the border, its troops are in the south. They just killed a Palestinian family of, I believe, 9 today. And then the rhetoric out of Jerusalem has been quite clear. Katz has talked about preparing the military to defeat and eradicate Hamas. Netanyahu has talked about resuming the war, preparing to resume the war. Whatever excuse they use, the whole notion that, and they knew this from the beginning, that those Israeli hostages who had died could be located easily. They knew this was impossible because most of them, almost probably all of them, were killed by Israeli bombs, and their captors were killed with them. And you have mountains and mountains of rubble. So they, number one, they don't have the equipment to dig through the rubble, and number two, they just don't know where they are. But Israel is aware of that. Israel knows Hamas is not going to essentially disband itself, but they don't care. I mean, the only question is how long they will resume the genocide. Trump has already given the green light for it. And so they won't give up on their demented project until they push the Palestinians out. There are only 2 ways to stop the genocide. 1, you pull the plug on the weapons, primarily from the United States. Or 2, countries, Turkey, France, Spain, use their warships to break the naval blockade, the naval blockade along the coast, and deliver humanitarian aid to the Palestinians and create a no-fly zone over Gaza, which isn't... I covered the Kurds in northern Iraq when Saddam was pushing them all up into the mountain passes, and that's precisely what they did. Iraqi forces had to withdraw below the 38th parallel, and there was a no-fly zone. It could easily be done. But I think that is, and certainly was what I attempted to do in my talk, the reason the genocide is not stopped is because these Western countries are fully on board with it. They're well aware from the beginning of what Israel intends to do, and they embrace it.
And why has the UN been so, totally unable to do anything to stop this? We recently saw an attempt to trigger this obligation to protect, and then that was scuttled because, bingo, they had that it's time for another ceasefire. So everyone wanted to give that ceasefire a chance. But essentially, the United Nations has been able to do absolutely nothing to stop this.
Well, there's no enforcement mechanism, number one. And countries like the United States and Israel have an utter disdain and disregard for the rule of law. So they just don't have the leverage by which they can force Israel to comply with the rule of law. And when we were today outside of BAE Systems, which, by the way, is one of the sponsors of your press club, I made the point that, we are calling for the rule of law. I mean, many of us might like to think of ourselves as dangerous leftists, but we are, in fact, on the political scale, conservatives. We demand the rule of law. That's what we are demanding. Under the rule of law,
what's the country that that flies in the face of the rule of law most is the United States. Yeah. And what is going to enable change in the US? We've got someone of the calibre of Mamdani at present, and he's managing to achieve an enormous amount of support with a minuscule amount of funds compared to what's being poured into his to shore up his rivals. What is it going to take to bring about real change in the US? Because essentially there's no difference really in terms of foreign policy between the two major parties.
Well, first of all, the billionaire class has already said that if Mamdani wins, they'll crucify him. They will make his time in office absolutely untenable. That is always the tactic of retrograde capitalists. I covered Pinochet's Chile. And we have to remember that the Democratic Party sabotaged Bernie Sanders' campaign. And if you go back before that, I was Ralph Nader's speechwriter, worked with Ralph in Iran. Our enemy was the Democratic Party. We tried everything possible, and did everything possible to block, excluding Nader from the debates, challenging voter lists. So the only mechanism we have now to wrest back our rapidly closing open society is militant union activity and civil disobedience by which we shut the machine down. And that is, I was in London a few months ago to do a fundraiser for my friend Roger Holland, who founded Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, and they shut down the M25 motorway, and he was given a 5-year prison sentence, even though he wasn't even on the motorway because he helped organize it. And that shows you what they're scared of. The fact is, it has to be clear to all of us by now that our governments won't halt the genocide. And so, like the great militant unions of the past, we have to stop loading these weapons on ships.
It's not only the United States, of course. Why aren't the other powers in the world doing anything about this? Russia, because they were partly responsible for what's happened to the Palestinians historically. China carries a lot of weight today. Why aren't we seeing any intervention from those two powers?
There's quiet. So the landscape is shifting in the Middle East. Iran, of course, has a close alliance with has an alliance with Russia and China. After Israel's bombing of Qatar, now the United States has a huge airbase, the largest in the Middle East, in Qatar. They certainly would have seen all of those missiles coming into Qatar, and they did not tell the Qataris until the explosion was already. And what this has done is kind of woken up Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, to the fact that the United States will do nothing to stay Israel's hand, that Israel is intent on creating, and has already created, intense greater Israel. I mean, it controls Syrian territory, not just the Golan Heights, but all the way up to Damascus, southern Lebanon, Gaza, of course. And there is a shift now, at the very least, bringing in Chinese air defense systems. So I think I think especially with that bombing of Qatar, it's beginning to change the dynamics. And let's remember that the American empire, in case you hadn't noticed, is in deep decline. Yep. Ruled by our version of collusion. And don't let these idiots turn your country into a vassal state, please.
Well, some would say it's too late.
Yeah.
The north of Australia is becoming a base for US ships and planes, and we have this agreement, as you know, with AUKUS, and the next war is mooted to be with China. And Australia has been there for all of these military adventures that the United States has embarked on. You were talking before about civil disobedience and union action. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit more about the sorts of things people can do and activists can do.
Well, I think that the activists have already changed the narrative. These courageous students who in the United States were our nation's conscience have been brutally suppressed. Campuses have been turned into academic gulags. Columbia University, where I've taught, is literally under police lockdown. You can't even get into the yard. Outside police forces have been integrated into campus security. Professors who have denounced what was done to these students and the draconian measures taken by the university, like Catherine Franke, this great law scholar at Columbia Law School for 25 years, have been pushed out. So this Zionist project and its supporters, they no longer have any answer. It's just naked forms of coercion. But let's be clear that none of this is about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a trope to shut down dissidents on the left. Because the real anti-Semites come from the right. And I know because I spent 2 years writing a book about the Christian right called American Fascists, the Christian Right and the War in America. And I'm a divinity school graduate. I mean, I come out of a strong Christian tradition. My father was a Presbyterian minister. My mother graduated from seminary and was a professor. But all of that gave me the tools to see these people for who they are. We are, living in a moment. It's a longer discussion, although I've written about it, with the global policies of neoliberalism and deindustrialization and everything else, that has just radically deformed our countries. And what you're seeing is a response, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in France, whether it's in Hungary, whether it's in the United States, that is the consequence of a bankrupt liberalism.
What about the role of the media? How has it reinforced the position of the various groups that are prosecuting this, that have brought us to where we are today? Because both of us have been members of the mainstream media. I can tell you that in Australia, for example, with respect to Palestinians, the way the media have approached the Palestinian-Israeli issue is that they send their journalists backwards and forwards to Israel. The doors to the managing director's office and the chairman's office are wide open to all these Zionist groups that are all chairmen and CEOs and directors with letterheads and business cards. And the Palestinians don't have that. So those doors have been firmly shut, really. So the media have colluded in preparing the public for this and preparing and laying the groundwork for politicians to be able to do this. And tell me a bit about why you left the mainstream media.
It was two phases. So I was so sick of the New York Times coverage of Palestine. The way they neuter your reporting two ways. One, so you're at war with not only Israeli politicians and military spokespeople who lie like they breathe, but you're also at war with your own Washington bureau, who's all their reporting, they're just stenographers for the powerful. It's all about access. And big, it's probably the same for you, but big media organizations like the New York Times really prize access, even though, of course, what you're fed, as I.F. Stone points out, is usually untrue. So you have your Washington bureau that is reporting things that are diametrically opposed or attempting to counter what you're reporting on the ground. And then the other way they would neuter stories is that even though I was in Jabalia when it was bombed and counted the bodies, every other paragraph, and I was quoting eyewitnesses, would be an IDF spokesperson. So by the time you got to the end of the story, you could believe whatever you wanted to believe, which was the point. So I took my vacation time and I went to live in Hana Yunus for 10 days and wrote a piece called A Gaza Diary with Joe Sacco, who I am currently doing a book with. We just came back from Egypt, where we interviewed 29 families from Gaza, and we're writing, it's all reported, we're writing about the genocide through their experiences and through their eyes. And Joe will draw, we did a book together called Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, written out of the poorest pockets of the United States, and 50 pages of that were his panels and drawings. We're doing the same project together. So we did that piece. Actually, I went to Edward Said and said, okay, I'm gonna do this piece. I'm not gonna interview any Fatah officials. I'm just gonna interview Palestinians in a refugee camp and live with them for 10 days and write about their lives, but I've gotta find someone who will publish it. He called the publisher Harper's and got them to do it, although when it came out, the Zionists went berserk. And so did my employer, the New York Times, who told me that I would never cover the Middle East again. And then when the Iraq War started, I spent a lot of time in Iraq. I understood, number one, I'd been in the first Gulf War, and then Kuwait with the Marine Corps, and then I'd been in Basra with the Shiites, rebels, until I was taken prisoner by the Iraqi Republican Guard. I got to be embedded with the Iraqi Republican Guard for 8 days. I would recommend it. So I certainly understood that because I was there for the UN inspection teams, that Saddam did have chemical stockpiles, but they were all destroyed after the war. And also Iraq broke down. It couldn't get any spare parts. Saddam was, I'm not making this up, living in one of his palaces writing romance novels. He was. He wasn't a threat anymore to his neighbors, certainly not to us. And I also, understanding Arab nationalism, Baathism, knew the folly of saying that we would be greeted as liberators and that the oil would pay for the reconstruction and that democracy, which is frankly the last thing the United States wanted to implant, would take over and emanate outwards across the Middle East. And of course, what they really wanted was to bring down the Ayatollahs in Iran I mean, this was magical thinking. And all of us who covered the Middle East understood this. There's no dispute about it. It was just a career killer to say it. But I think for me it was personal in the sense that I understood that people I cared about, because of this, what ended up being a 20-year project, a 20-year fiasco, which destroyed Iraq, would take the lives of people I cared about, friends of mine. And same with Gaza. And that, you know, I would go back one day, and you know, we may have failed, but I at least wanted to say I tried. I was booed off. I was on all sorts of national shows denouncing the war, and then I was on a commencement stage where I denounced the war, and the audience of 1,000 people got up and began to sing "God Bless America," you know, and cut my mic, and then the right-wing trash Murdoch people. I don't know about Australia, produced some of the greatest journalists of our era, Julian Assange, John Bilger, and frankly, some of the worst.
Perhaps one final question, since you raised Julian Assange. So Julian was prosecuted for revealing what the United States did not want revealed.
Yeah.
Today, it's all happening out in the open. That is extraordinary that we've come that far from 2011 to 2025, and there's been such a massive change for what is tolerated. So his prosecution was in vain. It's all out in the open now. What does that, what does that foretell for the future?
Well, all of the institutions, I'll speak as an American, tasked with defending democratic civil rights, have collapsed. This preceded Trump. I mean, Trump is the symptom, he's not the disease. And I spent 20 years writing about it in book after book. Death of the liberal class, empire of illusion, the end of spectacle, the triumph of the end of literacy and the triumph of spectacle, which, interestingly enough, begins at a World Wrestling Federation match. I had no idea we were going to get a president that came out of professional wrestling. America, the Farewell Tour, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt, I mean, all of it. And I think like a few other writers, Barbara Ehrenreich, Chalmers Johnson, we all kept saying you can't distort a society like this, and I drew on my own experience covering the war in Yugoslavia, and you are eventually going to vomit up the same kinds of figures that I covered in Yugoslavia, Radovan Karadzic, Slobodan Milosevic, Franjo Tuđman, etc. And so the problem is the decay precedes Trump. The Democratic Party is a corpse. It doesn't even function as a political party. If a political party is driven by the demands of its base, it doesn't function as a political party. They didn't even get to vote for the last presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, who ran a vapid, issueless, celebrity-driven campaign that stood for nothing. I mean, 77% of registered Democrats want to end arms shipments to Israel. And the Democratic Party has capitulated, has failed in any meaningful way to halt Trump's rapid consolidation of our police state and authoritarian control, along with the media, along with the universities. Labor is a spent force in the United States, only 11% organized. 6% of those are public workers who don't even have the right to strike. The strike is the only real weapon we have, which is why they took it away from us. So as in the United States, I don't see how we're going to halt it. I mean, the thing that astonishes me is how fast what's happening. And it's very frightening. We have just, so you had the trope of anti-Semitism used to shut down the left and take over the universities. And look, I went to Harvard, I've taught at Princeton, I've taught at Columbia. The idea that these universities are incubators of anti-Semitism is ridiculous. Not that anti-Semitism doesn't exist, it does. But the idea that these institutions foster it. Yet they all got down on their knees. Yeah. And they gave credibility to this false narrative that, of course, is now being used to essentially shut down free speech. They have shut down free speech. The press the decay in the press, again, preceded Trump. But what you're watching now, it's all billionaires. I mean, Bezos owns the Washington Post. Larry Ellison is bought up CBS, and it looks like he's about to buy up CNN and HBO and TikTok. And they hate TikTok because it was a mechanism that skirted the legacy media and allowed people to actually see the genocide. But I can tell you that once Larry Ellison gets his hands on it, this is a guy who's contributed millions of dollars to the IDF and has just appointed this arch-Zionist Barry Weiss to run the news division of CBS. It's over. So the billionaire class, which is wedded with the Zionist lobby for, I think, some of the reasons I touched upon, is rapidly closing the space. And I get hit every time I do something on the genocide on the YouTube channel, and some of my YouTubes, when I did a month ago, has 2.4 million views, they demonetize it. They demonetize it, they throw in algorithms, it's clear. I mean, like on X, that's completely obvious because it gets stuck at 276,000. So when you get new subscribers, it magically goes back 276,000, which is not insignificant, but it's been stuck there for so long, it's kind of become a joke. So yeah, and you know who actually foresaw this was Julian. If you go back and read his book, Cypherpunks, he talks about the power of the internet initially to create spaces for people to challenge the dominant narrative and challenge authority, but ultimately, and he's right, of course, it will become one of the most effective mechanisms of control because it's been seized by the most retrograde forces. And let's be clear, YouTube, X, all these people are now completely wedded to the security and surveillance apparatus. They hire people from it. I did an interview with Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, which was immediately demonetized because it's Roger Waters. It's just who's running these algorithms? Well, we know, they come out of the Israeli military. So yeah, the situation is really grim. I hope you're not I don't think you are where we are, but we're in a really bad place. And the fact that Trump is essentially consolidating power as a dictator, he just runs roughshod over every constitutional right because he has an obsequious Republican Party in control of Congress and a bunch of right-wing lunatics on the Supreme Court. There's just no, and even though we have courageous judges who are issuing rulings against the Trump administration, the Department of Justice is run by an idiot, Pam Bondi. Look at these people. It's kind of they're buffoons, except they're buffoons who can kill you. Go back and look at the Nazi Party. They were also buffoons, but that doesn't mean they weren't incredibly dangerous. Trump is just out of control. Every speech that he gives, which is always the same, actually, and the narcissism and the cabinet meetings. I feel like I lived in Latin America for 6 years. There's that great novel by the Guatemala Studios, El Presidente. It's kind of, that's where we are. You know, it's who can lick El Presidente's shoes, you know, with more passion and alacrity. I mean, watch us, if you get a chance, just next time he has a cabinet meeting, it's pretty grim, just watch it. It's, that's where we are. But unfortunately, you know, we also have this incredibly powerful military that can do a lot. I mean, he's bombing boats off of Venezuela.
Yeah.
The whole thing is nuts. So, yeah, I don't know. I may have to move to Australia. I don't know.
I know Chris is going to thank you in a moment, but I just wanted to say thank you for making the effort to come all the way here. And thank you for focusing on the Palestinian people. It's so important to all of us around the world who are just really shattered at where this has come to, and perhaps really has forced us, all of us, larger numbers of people than in the past, to see how bad things have you know, just how bad things are. And perhaps we really have to get to the edge in order to be able to turn things around. Please thank